Doc was in close as we could figure it out. It was probably around 36, 37 years. It's been a long time. Doc and Izzy and I and Sharon, we've hunted together, fished together, and worked on police horses together, and worked on our horses, and done a whole lot of things. And trying to figure out one of the stories or one of the special times that Doc had shared with her, some real experiences. And I think every time he came to the farm was an adventure. There was nothing dull about Doc's visit to Deerfield or Stone Ridge. No. From the time that he got into a fist fight with my neighbor, parked cars, it's one of his patient days. Good thing he was in a good mood that night. And one story that I really remember was we had a little white pony named Charlie. And I know you all know how rotten little white ponies would be. Well, this pony somehow learned to tell Doc's truck. Of course, it's probably from the bald tires flopping or the fender was banging on the side of the truck as he was pulling into the parking lot. And this pony knew Doc was on his way. And that pony turned from a little mild-mannered children's packer pony into the pony from hell. So Doc would come in, and you couldn't even get in the stall with this thing. You couldn't catch it. So the only way to get it was Doc would come in and lasso it. So we just put this new ultra-modern barn cleaning system in. And this conveyor belt took this manure pile, took it out the back of the barn, and put it up on a pile. We used to nickname it Mount Deerfield. Well, after it got so high, I was going to take the tractor loader, we'd move it on out. Well, it happened to be quite a height, maybe 10 or 12 feet tall by that time. So Doc gets a hold of Charlie with a rope, and normally he's got him snug down pretty tight. Doc's a pretty stout, big guy, and prides himself on never letting a horse or an animal get away from him. So he gets this rope around old Charlie's head, gets him right to the door, and Charlie's slick. He gets about a 3-foot run on Doc. Sharon looked down the aisle, and here comes Charlie, a dead run down this probably about a 60-foot aisleway, and Doc is like this. Well, of course, Charlie comes out the back door, and the first thing he sees is the manure pile. Nothing personal, you understand. So what he does, he goes over the top of the manure pile. You got to give Doc credit. He was still on that rope. About halfway through the manure pile, he lost his footing. There he went face first, and he finally let go of the rope. And Charlie got his lasso. I think that's what really perturbed him more than anything. He lost him a little bit. Well, that's just one of the stories. And Sharon and I have been trying to think how we can relive some of the old days and not lose Doc and his friends. So what we figured we'd do is Sharon normally gets a lot of animals. So I figured once she gets about 12 or 15 of her cats and dogs that need to be neutered or spayed, we're going to come down to Doc's and Izzy's on a Sunday afternoon when the Redskins are playing. Like the old days. We're going to go into his living room, and he's going to have all the cats and dogs laid out on the floor on newspaper, rooting for his favorite team. So that's what it was like in the old days. But we've enjoyed our relationship, and I'm sure it won't end. And I'm jealous. I'd like to retire too. We're thinking about it. So, anything you'd like to say?
I'd like to tell a story about one of my oldies. I'm famous for my oldies. I always have 2 or 3 oldies that are at least between the age of 30 and 40, and always calling Deepwood about this oldie or that oldie that's about to die, but we can't let it die, and we have to save it, and we go on for years with all my oldies. Well, one day, one of my oldies who had the run of the place quit, had walked into the middle of the barn, laid down, and couldn't get up. And so when we got there in the morning, there was Twit, as a large pony. He was flat out in the aisleway, couldn't get up. I knew he was going to die. He'd lift his head, you'd give him some grain, you'd give him a little warm water, and we waited around for Doc to come, and he and Izzy walk in, and they look at the pony, and, kind of walk around it, and kind of pass the afternoon, and then all of a sudden, Doc and Izzy said, well, we're going to turn him over. I said, but, what are you going to do for him? He's going to die. I know he's old, but you have to help him. We have to get him up. So they flip him over on the other side, and Doc says, do you have a glass of water around here someplace? And I'm like, what is the matter with this man? I'm in tears, when can I take my cat home? And he looked at me and he said, about 15 minutes. He said, you want to come with me? And I said, you know, I'm following him in there. He's got my cat under his arm. He walks up to the table and takes this little oxygen mask and shoves it on its nose. Well, I left. I thought, this is, you know, the last time I'll see it. And sure, 10 minutes later, I'm sitting out there in the car, and he comes out with the cat under his arm and hands it to me, and he says, take it home and put it in a hot water bottle. It was fine. Lived another couple of years. So we really do appreciate what you've done for us, and we really miss you being down there, but we will come down and see you with all of them. Thank you.
So I opened that stall door and looked in there, and sure enough, he had his, and I went to the other stall, and he did cut the right one, but I remembered that. And about 2 or 3 months later, I had another solid colored stud colt, and I called him up to come and castrate him, and I figured, well, I'll fix you. So Doc didn't want to cut him in a stall. He said, let's get him out in the pen. I said, okay. So I'm pulling on the horse's head, and Doc's pushing this button. About that time, I told that horse, I said, kick him. And it's not funny, but that colt kicked Doc. I had to go in the house to get a bag of ice and put it around his thigh, and he sat on a bucket, but he did castrate that colt. Thanks, Doc.
Around 65, when I came down from Buffalo, New York, with that old Palomino gelding of mine, and the first time got down here, I had come down earlier to get moved in down here, and then had to go back up north to get the horses and bring them back down here. And when I did, the gelding was sore and couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And I think, Doc, it's the only time you ever goofed on a diagnosis. He'd come out to check him, and he had used the block of wood to see about checking out for navicular, and he put his foot on the block and wouldn't put his weight on it. So Doc called me, he said, we're going to have to take an x-ray. It looks like you've got problems. So on Saturday, he and Doc were out there, and he had put the x-ray down on the ground and had the machine and brought the old cub up, and he put his foot on the x-ray, and he said, but see, he said he's only putting his toe down, he won't put any weight on it. Well, this was about the first time they had seen me, and I started laughing, and they probably wondering, what is this weirdo we've hooked up with? And I said, Doc, I'm sorry, I should have told you that this horse is so powerful, I've always trained him that he wasn't to put his foot down until I told him to, because I couldn't argue with him or pull him around. All I did was say, put your foot down, cub, and boom, there he goes. X-ray was fine, and Doc took care of him for the next 22 years. And but Doc got back at me with the German Shepherd Princess that I had. She'd got a bone caught in her throat, and brought her out to the house, and Doc had her in the house up on the table, and he's standing there with this hose, and I'm looking, and wait a minute, where's all this hose going? You know, he's running his hand back and forth on the hose, of course, and so he got back at me on that. But, and then we had another mare that whenever Doc palpated her, he'd pull his arm out and she would let it. And every time. She sounds better every time I tune her. And Izzy and Doc, we love you. We value your friendship. We're going to miss you like crazy. And if you ever decide to get rid of that wolf head painting, I want first crack at it. Just the best of luck and everything to you. We've really done
one area of activity. He's a terrific individual.